I'll call you back.
The chandelier light burned cold against her skin. Cameras clicked like distant gunfire. She stood at the podium, alone, while the ballroom dripped with money and contempt. Every man in a tux had turned slightly away, like she carried something contagious. Impressive resume, he said, smiling with the confidence of someone who thought the world belonged to him. Nathan Hawthorne, Forbes' golden son, white teeth, white skin, white empire. He raised his champagne glass just high enough for the crowd to follow his cue. But let's be honest, they don't usually make it this far. The laughter wasn't loud but sharp, a collective exhale dressed as amusement. Her throat tightened but her spine stayed iron. Behind the microphone, Maya's hand clenched the edge of the podium until her nails bit through the skin. No one intervened, not the host, not the reporters, not the board members she had fought twice as hard to stand beside. Only the sound of ice swirling in their glasses. He leaned closer, just enough to make sure only the front row heard. "You'll never outrun the ceiling we built for you." The words cut like a scalpel. Clean and deliberate, a camera flash burst, blinding, white hot, and caught her at the split second between fury and composure. That single frame would be plastered across news sites by morning. The black woman who froze. She forced her jaw to lock. Breath steady, but something inside her cracked. Not softly, but like a bone underweight. Outside, through the ballroom's glass wall, storm clouds rolled over the city skyline like a warning. Inside, Maya whispered to herself, inaudible. "Dangerous, watch me." And then the lights flickered. Everything, the laughter, the applause, the power, held its breath. The orchestra played something expensive. It wasn't a song anyone loved, just the kind people used to drown out tension. The glass ballroom shimmered under the chandelier's indifferent light. Waiters in white gloves floated past with trays of champagne, and every corner hummed with quiet performance. Maya adjusted the cuff of her tailored black suit. No sequins, no pretense. She was here as the newly appointed COO, not decoration. But the way eyes slid across her, assessing, narrowing, dismissing, told a different story. "Congratulations," someone said without looking at her. A man with the kind of smile that mistook tolerance for generosity. "Big leap for diversity," she didn't answer. Words like diversity were polished weapons in rooms like this. Nathan Hawthorne appeared like a scene shift. Tall, calculated, the kind of billionaire who believed headlines were birthrights. His entourage followed at a perfect distance, laughter on command, teeth on display. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathan said, stepping up to the microphone. "Tonight we celebrate innovation, leadership, and apparently miracles." The crowd chuckled, a soft, obedient sound. Maya's breath locked behind her ribs. Nathan gestured toward her with a champagne glass, a mock toast. "I mean, look at this. This is what makes America special. Anyone can climb, if they're willing to entertain us along the way." The word hung in the air. Entertain. Like she was a novelty act. Cameras angled toward her face. She forced her expression still, controlled. No one would see her bleed. Nathan leaned in just close enough for the microphones to miss it. "But don't confuse the stage for the throne. You don't belong up here." Her knuckles went white on the podium's edge. A reporter shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the back sipped champagne louder than necessary. No one intervened. No one ever did. The air tightened. Nathan's smile widened. "Let's give her a hand," he said, voice smooth, sharp as glass. Polite applause followed. Mechanical. Hollow. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she stepped to the microphone. The sound system hummed, waiting. Every camera was pointed at her now, not out of respect, but to catch the moment she cracked. She looked out at the sea of polished faces. Not one ally in sight. Her throat felt like stone, but her mind sharpened. "Miracles," she finally said, voice even, "are only miracles to those who've never fought for air." A small fracture ran through the room's smugness. Nathan's jaw tightened. She walked off the stage before the applause could die, the sound of her heels loud in the silence. Behind her, Nathan whispered something to a board member. Laughter followed like the echo of a door closing. Maya didn't look back. Outside the ballroom, the night air was colder, raw. Her reflection in the glass doors was steady, but her chest burned. The world thought it saw a woman who froze. But inside something had shifted, not softly, but like steel under heat. The storm was coming. The office smelled like stale coffee and silence. Not the ordinary kind. This was curated silence, the kind that had been arranged to sound polite. Maya walked through the glass hallway, heels muted against marble, and felt eyes pull at her back like hooks. The morning after the gala, the building's walls had already swallowed the incident whole, not erased it. Contained it. Controlled it. "Good morning, COO," someone said too sweetly. Karen, executive assistant, mid-50s, voice dripping with the cheerfulness that came with not having skin in the game. "Morning," Maya replied. Her voice didn't rise or bend. Two analysts paused at the water cooler. Their conversation cut clean the moment she passed. One pretended to check his phone. The other coughed into nothing. It wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't say that carved the shape of the day. Maya reached the boardroom. Frosted glass walls. 12 chairs. 11 men. 1 woman. None smiling. "Good of you to join us," said James Latimer, senior VP. White hair, expensive suit, old money wrapped in civility. She sat at the end of the table not because she was late, but because that's where they'd left the empty chair. Not the center. Not the head. The end. A screen flickered to life with the company's morning numbers. PR headlines scrolled along the ticker at the bottom. Gala photos already circulating, her face frozen beneath chandeliers. Captions dressed the humiliation in neutral language. "Historic night for tech diversity." James cleared his throat. "There's been chatter about last night," he said. "Some investors are concerned about the optics." "The optics," she repeated flatly. He nodded, like that was the responsible thing to say. "Nathan's comments were unfortunate, but the market responds to perception, not intention. We need to reassure our stakeholders that our leadership remains stable." "Stable," she said again, the word cracking dry in her mouth. "Meaning me." A rustle of discomfort moved through the room like static. "I think what James means," chimed in Marlene from HR, "is that we need to focus on unity. It's not about anyone personally. Let's not make this about race." Every syllable was careful, practiced. She'd probably used that line in training modules. Maya's jaw flexed. It was about race. That's the point. No one looked at her directly. The CFO leaned forward, voice lowered like they were doing her a kindness. "Look, Maya, you're brilliant. But the board has sensitivities. If we start making this political, it could cost everyone." Everyone, they always said everyone when they meant her alone. She opened the investor dashboard on the tablet in front of her. Nathan's company dipped 2% overnight. Ours rose 3%. Maybe stakeholders are responding to strength. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. Strength has many interpretations. That was how they did it. No direct attack. Just slow, suffocating hands pressed against the ceiling. Maya set the tablet down. "I won't play along with the narrative that what happened was harmless." "It's business," James said softly. "Not personal." The line was centuries old. She leaned forward, voice steady as a blade. "It was always personal." For a split second, something shifted. Not respect, recognition. She wasn't going to be quiet. The room stiffened. No one came to her defense, but she'd stopped expecting them to. The meeting moved on like nothing happened. Earnings reports. Expansion plans. Nathan's name lingered in every subtext. When it ended, people filed out in quiet pairs, whispering just far enough away. Karen appeared with a gentle smile and a printed public statement already drafted. Carefully crafted words designed to dilute. "We celebrate all voices in leadership and stand against divisive language." Maya didn't touch the paper. She stepped into the corridor. Through the window, the city skyline bled with winter light. Her phone buzzed. A text from a journalist she didn't know. Saw the clip. "If you ever want the real story out, talk to me." She didn't reply. Not yet. A passing intern lowered her eyes as if Maya was something dangerous. Maybe she was. At the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored doors. Same woman, different temperature. She could feel the structure of the building pressing down on her. Not brick and steel, but centuries of boardroom etiquette, inherited power, and unspoken rules. Ceilings weren't made of glass. They were made of hands. Hands that held you down and pretended to applaud. The elevator doors opened with a metallic sigh. She walked in without lowering her gaze. The office air was sharper than usual. Not cold, controlled. Someone had calibrated the temperature to match the mood. Efficient, sterile, and quiet enough to make every cough sound like a crime. Maya walked through the lobby and conversations dissolved into nothing. Eyes flicked up, then away. It was the morning after the gala. Nothing had been forgotten. Everything had been repackaged. A receptionist forced a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Turner." Maya nodded once. No small talk. Every word wasted here would be dissected. Two analysts by the water cooler leaned into each other, whispering. One of them, Eli, used to ask her for guidance when he was new. Now he wouldn't meet her gaze. She didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of the story they'd already built. When the elevator doors opened, she caught her reflection in the chrome. Perfect suit, sharp posture, eyes like locked steel. But the bruise of last night sat beneath the surface, quiet and heavy. The boardroom was already full. 12 chairs. 11 men. 1 woman. No empty spaces at the center of the table. "Miss Turner," said James Latimer, senior VP, his voice carefully neutral. "Glad you could join us." They hadn't saved her a proper seat. 1 chair, slightly off angle, waited at the far end. She didn't adjust it when she sat down. They'd notice if she did. The screen at the front displayed news headlines. Gala footage played in silent loop. Her face beneath the chandelier. Nathan Hawthorne's grin. The caption below read, "Breaking Barriers, a Night of Celebration." A room full of executives stared at those headlines and pretended not to. James cleared his throat. "We should address optics. Some investors are uneasy about the tone of last night's exchange." "The tone," she said flatly. He nodded, hands folded like a benevolent judge. "Nathan has a reputation. We can't control what people say at public events, but we can control how we respond. If we frame this as friendly banter, the story will die quietly." Marlene from HR chimed in, voice polished to corporate gloss. "Yes, I think we should avoid escalation. No one wants this to turn into a thing. A thing." They couldn't even say racism. Maya leaned back in her chair. "So we pretend it didn't happen." "We don't pretend," James corrected. "We reframe. It's good business," a few subtle nods. They were proud of their civility. She tapped the table once. "Nathan humiliated an executive on stage. You all saw it." "It was a joke," someone muttered. "You're reading too much into it." The silence that followed wasn't real silence. It was a wall, smooth, immaculate, designed to keep her out. Maya let the quiet stretch. "This isn't about a joke," she said finally. "It's about a room full of people deciding it wasn't their problem." The CFO leaned forward. "Maya, you've got to understand how fragile these relationships are. Nathan's influence is significant. He owns the stage," James added. "We own nothing if we start a war." Her nails pressed into the polished wood. "I'm not starting a war. I'm telling the truth." James smiled thinly. "That's how wars start." No one spoke after that. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Keep your head down. Keep the machine clean. The meeting shifted to numbers, mergers, growth strategy. Every slide was noise. Her name appeared on the agenda, but no one asked for her input. When it ended, people rose in pairs, already whispering in corners. One man clapped her lightly on the shoulder as he passed. "Tough night." "Keep smiling." She didn't. Outside, Karen from PR handed her a printed statement. "We value diversity. We celebrate strong voices in leadership. Last night was a moment of light-hearted exchange, and we look forward to continued collaboration with Mr. Hawthorne." Every line was soaked in denial. Maya handed it back. "No," Karen's smile wavered. "The board signed off. Then they can sign it without my name." She walked down the hallway. The light above was blinding, almost surgical. Her phone buzzed. A message from a journalist. "I saw what happened last night. If you want the real story out, call me." She slid the phone into her pocket without replying. Not yet. An intern passed her, stepping instinctively to the side like Maya carried danger. Maybe she did. Maybe the real threat was someone who refused to be silent. She stopped at the end of the corridor, looking through the glass at the city skyline. The ceiling above wasn't made of glass. That was the lie they sold. It was made of hands. Hands that held you down and clapped while doing it. Maya straightened her shoulders. The ceiling didn't crack that easily. But ceilings were built by people. And people could break. The elevator doors opened. She walked in without hesitation. The conference room was dim, blinds half drawn, the air thick with expensive cologne and quiet treachery. Maya watched the projection on the wall, market trend graphs, acquisition rumors, Nathan Hawthorne's company name slipping through her company's orbit like a shadow waiting to swallow it whole. She didn't need the financial analyst's voice to finish the sentence. The pattern was already obvious. Nathan wasn't just mocking her. He was moving in. If the deal structure follows this trajectory, the analyst stammered, Hawthorne Industries could gain majority leverage by the end of Q2. A controlled silence spread around the table. Not shock, recognition. Some of them already knew. James Latimer cleared his throat as if reading from a script. This could be good for us. Nathan's consortium brings stability. It's just business. Maya didn't blink. It's a takeover. Partnership, he corrected smoothly. She turned her gaze slowly to him.
Say what it is. The CFO looked down at his papers.
No one wanted to meet her eyes. Their silence wasn't confusion, it was complicity. The knife was already in her back. They were only deciding how fast to twist it. A board member shifted in his chair. Nathan has reach. He's untouchable right now. It would be smart to align with power rather than what? She cut in. Rather than make this personal, there it was again. That word, personal. As if power plays wrapped in racial contempt were just unfortunate scheduling conflicts. Maya stood, slow and deliberate. A man publicly humiliates a black woman on stage, then moves to acquire the company where she's the only black executive in power. That's not personal. James raised both hands in a performance of calm. Maya, you're brilliant. But brilliance doesn't always win against structure. This is how the system works. She stared at him. Then the system needs to bleed. A nervous laugh broke out from one end of the table, instantly swallowed by silence. No one knew if she was serious. She did. When the meeting ended, no one lingered. They moved like actors exiting a stage they didn't want to share. Karen slipped her a copy of the preliminary alignment strategy. Nathan's name appeared 14 times in 8 pages. The hallway outside felt narrower than usual. She walked fast. She needed air. She found Lucas by the server room door, her old mentor, the one person who used to tell her when knives were coming. His tie was loosened, his expression tired. He looked at her like someone standing too close to a fire. I warned you, he said quietly. You warned me he was dangerous, she replied. You didn't say the board would hand him the key. He exhaled slowly. They think aligning with him will keep them safe. They always think that. What about you? She asked. His silence was answer enough. You were the one who told me this job was a war with good lighting, she said. Did you forget? He looked down at his shoes. I didn't forget. I just learned when not to fight. That's not wisdom, she said. That's surrender. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Somewhere down the hall, printers spat out documents sealing her company's future. She could almost hear the weight of signatures being placed against her name. They'll push you out, Lucas said finally, quietly, with a smile. You won't even see the clause that ends you. I already saw it, she said. He frowned. Then you know what's coming. She nodded once. Yes, and I'm not letting them hand me over. For a moment, his mask slipped. The man who had taught her to fight flickered beneath the corporate armor. Be careful, Maya. People who go against Nathan don't stay standing long. She stepped closer, voice low and surgical. Then maybe it's time someone didn't flinch. She left him standing there, staring at the floor like a man watching a storm he didn't want to name. Outside, in the empty executive lounge, she opened her laptop. Her hands were steady. Her pulse wasn't. She started digging, financial filings, sub-company mergers, shell accounts disguised as innovation ventures. One thread at a time, she followed the invisible web that tied Nathan's empire to her board's cowardice. It was all there. Quiet knives hidden behind paperwork and polished speeches. A message pinged on her secure email. We have information. Hawthorne's offshore trail isn't clean. We should talk. Anonymous. She stared at it for a long moment, the screen's cold light reflecting in her eyes. Nathan Hawthorne thought he was building a cage around her. He hadn't realized she'd learned how to set fires inside cages. The office at night felt like a different planet. The hum of servers was louder, the lights colder, the people gone. Only the security cameras watched, their red dots blinking like patient eyes. Maya sat alone at her desk, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by financial statements, encrypted files, and a burner laptop not connected to the company network. If they were going to corner her in silence, she'd burn their silence down with proof. The anonymous email had led to a trail, dirty acquisitions, shell companies, offshore accounts tied to Nathan Hawthorne's empire. Not speculation. Numbers. Transfers. The kind that buried men in courtrooms, she whispered to herself, voice low, steady. If they won't listen to my words, they'll listen to the evidence. The elevator dinged. Soft footsteps, not security. Lucas. He stepped inside without asking, jacket thrown over his shoulder. You're playing with fire. I'm done letting fire choose where it burns, she replied. He looked at the stacks of documents, the glowing screen, the locked USB drives. Where did you get this? Anonymous tip. Someone inside Hawthorne's chain wants him gone, or wants you gone. She didn't look up. Either way, they handed me the knife. Lucas leaned against the wall. You can't fight him alone. I already am. He exhaled sharply. Maya. People have tried. He owns boardrooms, senators, judges. Then I'll find the one thing he doesn't own. What's that? The truth. He didn't laugh. He didn't need to. They both knew truth wasn't a shield. It was a weapon that cut both ways. She turned her laptop toward him. A spreadsheet filled with transaction codes and offshore routing numbers glared back. Hawthorne Industries has been inflating valuations through shell acquisitions, buying into tech startups, then laundering profit through Cayman subsidiaries. If I connect this to his recent push for acquisition, he's not merging, he's burying. Lucas scanned the screen slowly. His jaw tightened. This isn't just leverage. This is a noose. Exactly, she said. And I intend to tighten it. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, you leak this, they'll come for you. They already are. By midnight, she had built a clean chain of evidence. Dates, wire transfers, names of complicit executives. The documents weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. The truth wasn't a headline, it was a detonator. She opened a secure messaging channel and uploaded the files to an encrypted drive. A single journalist contact stared at her from the screen. Not yet. Timing was everything. Her mind drifted, not to the boardroom, not to Nathan's grin, but to the years before this night. Flashback. A startup pitch. She stood in a room of venture capitalists, the only black woman in the building. Her idea was sound, her research precise, her slides sharp. But the man across the table sipped his coffee and said, You're articulate, that's refreshing. They'd turned her brilliance into charity. Later, when funding collapsed, she watched the same idea get approved under a white man's name 6 months later. She learned then, power never apologized. It just changed faces. Back to the present. She typed the first line of her contingency plan. If this email is received, it means I am no longer safe within my company. All attached files are verified and traceable to Nathan Hawthorne's offshore network. Footsteps again, this time slower. Lucas reappeared holding a flash drive. Old audit reports. You'll need them if you want to connect internal compliance to his accounts. They're terrified to admit it, but the trail goes through us. She took the drive. Why help me? Because I taught you to fight, he said quietly. And I'm tired of pretending this ceiling isn't real. The next morning, the building buzzed like a hive. Hawthorne's PR machine was working overtime. Rumors of strategic partnerships filled the air. Nathan's face appeared on every finance headline. She walked into the elevator, calm as steel. By the time the doors opened, the evidence sat encrypted in 3 different drives across 3 separate networks. One push of a button could shatter Nathan's empire. But she wasn't pushing yet, not until the timing was perfect. Karen caught her in the hallway. The board wants to meet this afternoon. They said it's urgent. Of course it was. Maya walked past her without slowing. She already knew what. The meeting was about compliance, contracts, and how to quietly erase her name before Nathan signed the papers. They thought she was cornered, but leverage didn't look like power until it snapped a neck. Back in her office, she stood at the window overlooking the city. Storm clouds thickened, gray swallowing the skyline. For a moment, she let the silence settle, not weak, not defeated. Calculating. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket and placed it on the desk like a loaded gun. Nathan Hawthorne wanted to build an empire on her humiliation. She was building something else. A trap. The hospital awoke in silence. Not the soft kind that soothes, but the brittle kind that cracks under its own weight. Morning light bled through the blinds of Ward C, slashing pale lines across the floor. In the corridor, a nurse stood still, gripping a folder so tightly the edges cut into her palm. Her name badge caught the light, but her eyes were locked on the patient file in her hand. The test results were impossible. No one should have been able to falsify this level of medical clearance. And yet the signatures were real, the stamps official. Down the hall, 2 security guards dragged a restrained man in a patient gown. He didn't fight. His head was low, steps slow, eyes dead. The nurse's heartbeat grew louder in her ears with every step they took closer. Dr. Hale emerged from his office. Calm on the surface. But the file he held trembled slightly. He had known this moment was inevitable. One forged document, one erased trail, and everything unravels. The corridor narrowed, every sound echoed, the squeak of rubber soles, the distant beeping of monitors, the soft metallic click of handcuffs. The nurse raised her eyes. Hale didn't look at her. He stared through her, through the walls, into the ruin he had built with precision and silence. When the patient passed by, their eyes met. Not in plea, not in hatred, but in quiet recognition. They were both trapped in something larger than themselves. An intern whispered at the nurse's shoulder, "What happened?" She didn't answer. She simply handed over the file, her knuckles white, her throat locked. The words written inside were enough to destroy careers, reputations, entire structures. The silent exposure had begun, and no one could stop it now. The boardroom wasn't built for truth. It was built for power. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the city skyline. Polished marble floors mirrored the rows of black leather chairs, and the long obsidian table stretched like a blade between 2 opposing worlds, those who controlled the narrative and those who lived beneath it. Elena sat at the far end, posture still, palms pressed against the table's cold surface. Her pulse thudded beneath her skin, but her face betrayed nothing. Across from her, Victor Langford, the billionaire who once mocked her at a gala in Miami, in front of 100 silent witnesses, leaned back in his chair like a king on a throne. The board members filed in, murmuring behind closed smiles. Reporters waited outside like vultures. The leaked medical file had hit the morning news cycle, and for the first time the empire Langford built showed a hairline crack. "Ms. Thompson," Victor said smoothly, lacing his fingers together, "I assume you understand the gravity of false allegations. I'd advise caution." Elena met his gaze without blinking. "I don't deal in allegations, Mr. Langford. I deal in facts, and facts don't ask for permission to exist." A quiet gasp rippled down the table. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another cleared his throat. Victor's smile tightened. "Then I trust you've prepared something substantial." Without a word, Elena slid a thick envelope toward the center of the table. Inside, notarized, affidavits, financial ledgers, falsified clearance records, timestamps. She didn't need to speak. The evidence was a storm that didn't require thunder. The chairman of the board adjusted his glasses. The moment he unfolded the first document, the silence thickened. Victor's hand twitched, just slightly. But enough. Outside, camera shutters clicked. Inside, marble cracked, not with sound but with the weight of truth. Elena exhaled slowly, every muscle wound tight, every word calculated. This was no longer survival. This was war. The lights were too bright. That was the first thing Elena felt when the studio doors opened. Heat on her skin, white beams searing down, making the polished floor gleam like wet glass. The air carried the sterile chill of climate control, overpowered by the quiet hum of cameras locked in position. Every surface in that room was built for spectacle, but this wasn't spectacle. This was a reckoning. The producers spoke in clipped tones behind the glass wall. The anchors adjusted their earpieces, faces carved into professional neutrality. News networks across the country were tuned in. The Langford Empire had called the press conference, but the narrative was no longer theirs to control. Elena stepped up to the podium. The wooden edge was smooth beneath her fingers. She could feel her own pulse through it, not fast but deep like a drum under the earth. The moment had weight. Victor Langford sat a few feet away at a separate table flanked by two attorneys in tailored suits. His tie was perfect, his posture flawless, but his eyes weren't still anymore. They flickered just once toward the cameras. A reporter raised her voice. "Ms. Thompson, what exactly are you alleging against Mr. Langford's company?" Elena didn't look at her. She looked at the cameras. "I'm not alleging," she said, voice steady. "I'm stating." A rustle went through the room. One of the attorneys shifted uncomfortably. "I spent 10 years watching people like me get passed over, mocked, erased, while the man behind me built an empire on exploitation. I have documents. I have signatures. I have witnesses who are no longer silent." She pulled a small stack of files from her bag and placed them on the podium. They weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. Victor's attorney leaned forward. "This is slander. None of this has been verified?" Elena's voice cut through his. "Every line has been verified, twice." The lights made the sweat at his temple glint. Cameras zoomed in. The feed went live to millions. The moderator tried to step in, but Victor rose before he could. "You think you can take everything from me because of some sob story and cheap theatrics?" His voice carried a low, controlled fury. "You're nothing, Elena. You always have been." A stillness fell like a blade. That single line landed, not just in the room, but across the airwaves. The subtext was naked, and the world heard it. A low murmur swelled in the press gallery. Journalists began scribbling faster. Someone at the back whispered, "He just said that on live TV." Elena didn't flinch. "That," she said softly, "is exactly why we're here." She stepped aside as the moderator signaled the start of the Q&A. Reporters swarmed, their questions sharp and relentless. Victor's legal team stumbled to control the narrative. His prepared statements unraveled under the heat of evidence and his own arrogance. Every answer he gave dug deeper. Every second was streamed, clipped, shared. The marble image of a billionaire untouchable was cracking in real time. Elena stood slightly behind the podium now, silent but unbroken. This was not revenge. This was exposure in its rawest form, and for the first time, the world wasn't looking away. Outside the building, thousands were already gathering, placards, cameras, chants that echoed through the streets. Victor Langford had built a world where people like Elena were supposed to stay quiet. He'd never planned for what would happen when one of them stopped. The sound of the gavel cracked like gunfire across the courtroom, sharp, final, unforgiving. Elena didn't move. She sat rigid on the witness bench, hands clasped in her lap, every muscle wired tight. Weeks of headlines had led to this room. Marble walls, heavy oak doors, a ceiling high enough to make anyone feel small, except today, the man who built the ceiling was the one being dragged down by it. Victor Langford stood at the defendant's table. The suit still fit perfectly, but it no longer carried weight. His attorneys whispered in frantic bursts, eyes darting to the jury box where 12 strangers held the shape of his empire in their hands. The cameras outside couldn't reach here. No spectacle. No rehearsed smirk. Only the raw truth of consequence. The prosecutor's voice cut through the hush. Mr. Langford's company deliberately falsified clearance records to bypass regulatory checks, disproportionately exploiting black-owned subcontractors. He profited from their silence, until she, a nod toward Elena, made sure there was none left. Victor stared forward, but his fingers drummed against the table. A tremor he couldn't stop. "Ms. Thompson," the judge said, turning toward her, "the court acknowledges your testimony and the evidence provided. Without it, this case would not stand where it does today." Elena inclined her head slightly. She didn't need a speech. The documents had spoken. The broadcast had opened the wound. The trial had bared the rot. The defense tried one last desperate move. My client has contributed billions to the economy, employed thousands. The prosecutor didn't flinch. And exploited hundreds. The jury foreman stood. 12 silent faces locked on one man. We find the defendant guilty. The word hung in the air like iron. Victor's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Couldn't. The weight of it finally landed, and not on his empire, but on him. The guard stepped forward. Cameras clicked through the narrow window slit on the door. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed. Elena exhaled through her nose, slow and steady. The courtroom was not victory. It was accountability. It wasn't triumph. It was proof. As Victor was led out in handcuffs, the polished marble floor reflected the fall of a man who once thought he couldn't be touched. Outside, the crowd's roar bled through the courthouse walls. Protest signs, press vans, voices that had been quiet for years now filled the air with a single steady rhythm. Elena rose and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The world didn't tilt, it shifted. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the dismantling of a lie. The street outside was loud, chants, cameras, the low hum of a city watching history bruise itself into memory. But Elena heard none of it. She stood alone on the rooftop of the building across from the courthouse, hands resting on the cold metal railing. Below her, the crowd pulsed like a single living thing. Protest signs swayed. Reporters shouted over each other. Headlines were already being written. The world had moved on to the spectacle of Victor Langford's downfall. But Elena wasn't here for the spectacle. She was listening to something else. The quiet inside her chest, raw and unfamiliar. Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a scar slowly cooling. She remembered every boardroom where her voice was dismissed, every meeting where she was spoken over, every door that closed a second too soon, every word that came wrapped in a smirk. The trial hadn't erased any of it. It had only made it visible. Her phone buzzed. A message from Renee. He's gone. They're transferring him now. Press is eating him alive. Elena didn't reply. She didn't need to. The door to the roof creaked open. Marcus, one of the whistleblowers who'd risked everything to stand beside her, stepped out. His coat collar was turned up against the wind. He didn't speak, just came to stand next to her. Below, Victor Langford's face flashed on a massive news screen, not the smirking titan of industry, but a handcuffed man being led into a transport van. The Chiron read, "Langford found guilty, Forbes empire collapses." Marcus finally spoke. "You did it?" Elena's eyes stayed fixed on the street. "No, we did it. And even then, it doesn't bring back what was taken." Wind lifted the edges of her hair. Somewhere below, a chant rose. Not of anger anymore, but something steadier. Defiant. Enduring. She turned away from the crowd, from the cameras, from the flashing headlines. The fight had ended in the courtroom, but the fracture it revealed stretched far beyond. Elena walked toward the rooftop door. "This isn't the finish line," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's just the truth finally catching up." Marcus didn't follow. He just watched as she disappeared down the stairwell. The city roared behind her, and above the noise there was a silence that belonged only to her. Not of defeat, not of fear, of survival. And for the first time, the weight she carried didn't feel like chains. It felt like a crown forged in fire. The conference hall smelled of new paint and ambition. Rows of journalists filled the seats, not with the hunger of scandal, but the sharpened curiosity of history unfolding. The stage was simple. A podium, 2 chairs, a large screen glowing softly with the words, "Thompson Global Initiative." Elena stood just behind the curtain, steady hands gripping the edge of her blazer. A year had passed since the verdict. Langford's empire had crumbled piece by piece. Board resignations, seized assets, congressional hearings. His name now lived in textbooks and legal precedents, not power circles. The same news networks that once ignored her now waited for her to speak. Not as a footnote, as a force. The stage manager whispered, "You're up." Elena stepped into the light. The crowd fell silent. Camera lenses tilted toward her like a wave turning inward. She walked to the podium without hurry. Every step built on years of being told she didn't belong in rooms like this. "Thank you for being here," she began. Her voice carried the steadiness of someone who no longer fought for permission to speak. This is not about one trial. It's not about one man's fall. It's about everything that was built to make people like me invisible, and everything we're going to build to make sure that never happens again. Applause rippled through the hall, not frenzied but firm, like a tide meeting the shore. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her shifted to a blueprint. Funding pipelines for Black-owned startups, legal aid networks, educational fellowships, corporate accountability structures. It wasn't vengeance. It was infrastructure. Marcus sat in the front row, hands clasped, eyes steady. Renee was beside him, smiling in that quiet, grounded way. Elena continued, "They called me ambitious like it was an insult. I wore it like armor. Now I wear it as legacy." Reporters scribbled. Flashes went off. But Elena wasn't performing for them. She was stating what was already written. When she ended her speech, the applause rose, not wild, but rooted, solid. She stepped off the podium, down the short steps, and into the crowd of people who had stood beside her when it was dangerous to do so. The last headline of the night would read, "Black CEO who brought down a billionaire launches new global initiative." But headlines couldn't capture what the me moment truly was. She wasn't standing in the shadow of a man who underestimated her anymore. She was standing on the throne she built herself, and this time no one could take it away.